Hey everyone, Daniel Hare with you here on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get into this episode, I do want to take a moment to pause and acknowledge the unusual and challenging environment that we are currently living through with the coronavirus pandemic. I want to just pray for all the families around the world who have lost loved ones, who have loved ones who are in treatment in hospitals right now. And obviously we hope that the spread is limited and that medical personnel have and are given every resource that they need to treat those who contract the virus. And I want to encourage all of you who are listening, many of you are lawyers, to make conscious and thoughtful decisions about how to conduct your work and your life over these next few weeks and months as we work to get through this. And also for those of you who might be listening with supervisory and authority in your law firms to have empathy and use facts to make good decisions about what to require of your people, lawyers and staff, during this time, because this is uncharted territory, obviously, as we've seen, especially in the last few days, in terms of what everyone around the country here is having to do in order to try to stem the tide of this. And so I would hope that all of us and all of you are making thoughtful and conscious decisions to the extent that you are able as well. And so we do want to have a show today, and we do want to continue to move forward. But we also thought it was appropriate to just pause and acknowledge that many of you are living in a little different world today than normal. And I think it's appropriate to say as much. So, okay, today is another Monday Mentors episode, and we are privileged to be joined by Troy Okruhlik. Troy is a shareholder with Harris Finley and Bogle in Fort Worth, where he is a civil trial attorney focusing on business litigation, particularly in the oil and gas industry. Troy is licensed to practice in 4 states and has been a Texas super lawyer and super lawyer rising star for multiple years. I'm so glad that you are with us today as we visit with Fort Worth oil and gas litigator Troy Okruhlik on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Troy Okruhlik joins us now. Troy, thanks so much for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you, Daniel. Excited to talk with you.
Well, we appreciate you being here. And I want to start by just letting you give our audience a little bit of your bio, but what's going on with your firm and your role in it, and let our audience get a little bit better feel for you and for your firm. And so why don't you start there?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Houston area, made my way to A&M for undergrad, kept making my way north to Baylor Law, graduated from Baylor Law in 2001, was lucky enough to get a job offer here from Harris Finley and Bogle in Fort Worth in 2001, started here without a ton of connection or experience with Fort Worth, but feel so lucky that we found Fort Worth and found this firm, started in 2001. Been here 19 years now, have no intention of being anywhere else. Love Fort Worth, love our firm. We have about 35 attorneys here at Harris Finley and Bogle. We cover a wide variety of practice areas. The heart of our work, half of us do commercial litigation generally, a strong focus on the oil and gas industry just because of the history of our firm. Mr. Harris, Mr. Finley, who started the firm 43 years ago, had a big background in oil and gas, and that's carried on through the years. Yeah, and so 60 or 70% of our work over here is oil and gas work, but also do a variety of other work just under the umbrella of commercial litigation, and then another half of our firm does a lot of people do exclusively oil and gas transactional work, whether that be title opinions or negotiating oil and gas leases amendments, and then also have a real estate section banking section. So cover a lot of areas. Also want to note we recently opened a new office. I say recently, it's probably been about 3 years now. Opened up an office in Parker County, Weatherford, Texas, just to the west of us here. That's a booming area, and have 3 attorneys out there led by Max Smith, and they do a variety of work, including criminal work out there.
Oh, wow.
Moved into a little bit of personal injury type of work also. So we cover a lot of areas within our 35 attorneys.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned it. That is a booming area. I just drove through it recently, so it's funny you mentioned that. And that's section out west of Fort Worth. Yeah, is really growing.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about just the oil and gas practice and the industry in general. What's going on with oil and gas practice right now? I know it's in some ways the law practice, trails and tracks the industry, and it's an up and down industry, but kind of has different components to it that move and all of that with the industry. So where are we right now with oil and gas as a law practice, and kind of what are the things that you're keeping an eye on in that industry right now?
Yeah, oil and gas prices are not where a lot of people in the industry would like them to be, but we can't do much about that.
Right.
On the litigation side, I don't know that the prices necessarily affect the volume of litigation that we get.
Okay.
It seems that there's always litigation to keep us busy and always litigation to be handled. It may have a little bit more effect on the transactional side. I think it certainly does. But the good news about that is that with our ability and what we've done as a firm is get licensed in lots of states.
Yeah.
So there's several of us that are licensed in Pennsylvania and North Dakota, in Ohio, and Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And so we've done that to accommodate some of our clients that have moved into properties in Pennsylvania and Ohio and North Dakota. And so we've really found that to be useful in terms of smoothing out some workloads. And that's probably been one of the biggest changes in the 20 years that I've been here. When I started, I'd say 80% of our workload was here in Tarrant County. Now, as I'm sitting here today, I'd say 20% of our caseload, of my personal caseload, let me speak for myself, is in Tarrant County. And so that diversification in terms of geography has been a big change over the years, and I think a good one.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's incredible. Well, and you referenced this when you were describing how you kind of became or came up through and joined Harris Finley Bogle when you did the transition after having grown up in Houston to then living in Fort Worth. And I want to ask you about that for those in our audience maybe that don't have familiarity with just the legal practice in Fort Worth. Talk about that a little bit for those that aren't familiar, and just kind of why you like practicing there. You definitely said that in your first comments. I want to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, don't get me talking about Fort Worth. I could talk about Fort Worth all day. We love Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Love the city. Love our neighborhood. Love downtown. If any of your listeners have not been to Fort Worth, come visit us. Come visit downtown Fort Worth. Come to the Stockshow and Rodeo. Come to the Stockyards. It's a fabulous place to be, and it's getting better all the time. And think the people are wonderful, and just all across the board. And I always say that people don't realize Fort Worth is the 13th biggest city in the country, just from a city population standpoint.
Yeah.
Fort Worth is bigger than Boston. It's bigger than Seattle. It's bigger than Denver. And so we've got all the luxuries and the various great things that big cities have. But it's remarkable when you go to downtown, when you go to lunch downtown, or when you're just tooling around town on the weekends, just how many people, how many friends you run across, and just how tight of a community it is.
Right.
And I think that's even more true within the legal community. Walking downtown for lunch, you'll see 5 or 6 attorneys that you've worked with in the past, that you may be working with right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real luxury of being an attorney in Fort Worth. If you have a case in Fort Worth, and there is a Fort Worth. You find the other side answers the lawsuit, and you find that it's a Fort Worth firm representing the other side. There is a better chance than not that you're going to know that attorney on the other side.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a relationship with that attorney on the other side. And of course, that doesn't mean that you don't zealously represent your client, but you already have a relationship with them. It makes discovery issues go smoother. It makes everything go smoother within the lawsuit. And I think it results in a better outcome and result for your client.
Well, and that's everything I've ever heard about the practice there is what you just said. So as I'm traveling around talking to lawyers, that environment of practice, of courtesy, of professionalism, and while at the same time, obviously, as you said, still advocating for your client is important and crucial, but it's certainly a different environment than maybe other areas. And so I think that's good for you to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to mention and have you maybe comment on this is as maybe lawyers are looking at, maybe they are in Houston or in Austin or in a smaller town around Texas and thinking about making a move to a different city or one of the larger cities. And I hear this sometimes, I'm sure you do as well, that when they start thinking about where they want to go, and Dallas Fort Worth is sort of rolls off the tongue. And what I've come to know after spending a lot of years with folks there in Fort Worth and other places that they're so different that you can't say them together, right? That if you want to practice,
without a doubt.
So I don't know if you talk a little bit about just the not necessarily it's not better or worse, it's different, and make sure that people understand that Fort Worth's a unique and separate and distinct city and bar and practice from Dallas, and that's important that people know that, depending on what they're looking for.
Absolutely, it's important that people know that, and it's important that people, if they're thinking about coming up here to work, that they make a critical distinction between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Right.
People, like you said, Dallas Fort Worth does roll off the tongue, but Fort Worth, us, my wife and I, and our friends, it's a rare event that we go over to Dallas.
Yeah.
We're Fort Worth people, and we're proud of that, as you can probably tell just 10 minutes into this podcast already.
Right.
And so, certainly no offense against Dallas. Got lots of friends in Dallas, but
sure.
But if you're a student and you're applying for a job at a Fort Worth firm, and I'm sure this would be true for other cities and their sister cities and suburbs. Make sure you say, make sure you're able to articulate why you want to be in Fort Worth in particular,
right?
And know the difference between Fort Worth and Dallas.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've received resumes. You and I have worked together in recruiting over the years, and can't tell you how many times I've received resumes and cover letters telling me that they want to work in the Harris Finley and Bogle Dallas office. Well, that's a fair or not. That's immediate kind of negative
to
that candidate. And so, definitely it's important to know the distinction, and it's important, this goes to a larger point of the conversation we'll probably have today. Just it's important to articulate why you want to be in Fort Worth at the particular firm you are applying to, and same for Austin and the particular firm you're applying to, as opposed to, I just want a job and a paycheck. It's important to the people reading the resumes and cover letters that you're not just looking for a paycheck, and you're looking to be a contributor to that particular team, because I promise you it's important to that person that's reading your resume and reading your cover letter, that you're more than just a cog. You're more than just a generic worker. They want you to be part of the team and part of the family, because we spend a lot of time working on things up here and hard things and being teammates together up here. And we want it to be something more than a paycheck and something more than just a worker bee.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Well, I want you to also take our audience into your life as an associate when you were getting started, and maybe share with them something that you learned as a young lawyer that has been critical to your success as you've progressed through your career. What stands out?
Sure. A couple good pieces of advice I got early on that I think have served well through the years is about client development and a couple of different aspects of client development. And one is client development within the firm. This isn't a unique thought to me, certainly, but I've read and have told to me to develop your fellow attorneys within your firm, the shareholders, treat them as your client, which certainly for the first several years they are.
Right.
Communicate with them, develop a relationship with them, go to lunch with them, learn about their cases. The more that you are involved with them and develop a relationship with them, certainly on a professional level, but on a personal level too, that will, the times when you aren't able to keep yourself busy through your own clients or through other attorneys at the firm, those relationships will serve you well.
Yeah.
And same with client development outside the firm. I don't, certainly at our firm, we don't expect associates for a while to be able to keep themselves busy with work outside the firm. What we do expect is for them to start that process, is to start developing those relationships, start, being involved in the community, so that many years down the road, when those relationships, when those friendships are at a position that they're able to make decisions regarding legal services, so that they might be in a position in order to get that business. And I guess the point is it's a long-term process.
Yeah. Right.
We certainly at our firm, we don't expect client development to be an overnight thing, or even a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year thing. Mm-hmm. It's a long-term process, and developing relationships and being involved in a community, and not being involved in the community in an artificial, forced way, but finding what it is that matters to you, raising your hand, becoming involved, and doing a good job at that. Whether that's a bar-related activity. For some people it is. For a lot of people it isn't. For whether it's a church group, whether it's a youth sports coaching situation, right? Whatever it is, raise your hand, be involved, and do a good job at what you're being involved in.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and something that we have discussed a couple of times on the show already. Just that. And picking something that is, authentic and enjoyable to you and natural to you. We've talked about that some as well, that sometimes people feel, like they have to, learn to play golf, or that they have to get involved, like you said, in the bar. And that might not be the natural fit for everybody. And finding what, works with you, that you'll be committed to and enjoy at least a little bit will make it just that much easier to connect with people when you're doing that and do a good job, like you just said, right?
Yeah, and that's so very true. And people can tell when it's forced and not authentic. Yeah. And for me, a big deal in my life is coaching my kids' sports teams, and so I've coached 30, 40 sports teams over the years, and it's something that I love to do, just for the relationship with my kids and the other kids,
right?
And because I'm a sports guy, right? But the side benefits out of doing a good job, and people seeing you do a good job at that, while you're not doing it to gain business, sometimes it has that side benefit too.
That's right. And I will confess, I'm coaching one of my kids in basketball right now, and it's the third sport that I've coached her in. And in each step, at the end or towards the end, she has said she does not want to play again. So I'm sure from your history, that's not a great sign that Dad's doing a very good job coaching. So we're in a little bit of trouble over here. I might need your help.
Maybe you need to hire an assistant.
I think I need something. Let me bring you down here and get a little hand. But is there anything that you picked up maybe later on in practice that you wish you had known, or someone had told you when you were in those first few years of practice, that you could let associates know about as they're getting started?
One thing that I think I made a mistake on that I wish I could, if I reround the clock and do over again, is to know your law school classmates.
Yes.
And stay in touch with your law school classmates.
Yeah.
When you get into the 10 or 15 year mark of being an attorney, your for most attorneys, the biggest source of referrals is other attorneys.
Right.
And your law school classmates are a great source for that in both ways. Knowing a good friend, a good law school friend that's an attorney in San Antonio that you can send business to, or an attorney in Houston that you can send business to, and vice versa. Those law school classmates are going to be a great source for help along the way. You not knowing the Houston judge that your case got assigned to, you needing a local counsel in Austin, them needing a local counsel in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Get to know your law school classmates and stay in touch with them after graduation is one thing I didn't do a good job of, and I wish I had done a better job of.
Yeah, that's good. And we've talked about that. That's something I think we need to continue to reiterate to the folks listening how important that is and how helpful that can be.
No doubt.
What is something that you notice in associates that makes an immediate positive impression on you? What do you see out of them that makes you look and take notice and say, oh, wow, what was that? Or who is that? Can I get that person some more work?
Right. Yeah. These probably aren't going to be any unique thoughts here, but an associate that's proactive, that thinks ahead, that does not just look for a task, getting a task from you and completing that task. An associate that thinks ahead to what will need to be done and has already maybe done some research on that issue, done some thinking on that issue at a minimum, and is able to talk about that issue rather than just taking assignments and checking the box and getting you back only what you asked for.
Yeah.
Certainly associates that follow up and keep up with the case, again, as opposed to just waiting for instructions of what to do next. And, another thing that I think associates can really take advantage of is a lot of the assigning shareholders, partners, don't have the time to really dig into the 50-page contract that is at the heart of this litigation, don't have time to dig into that case law. And so if you do have that time, review that full contract once, twice, three times, raise some issues that the shareholder the partner might not have thought of, discussed with the client yet. A lot of times the associates have the time to really dig into that and don't take for granted that the shareholder partner has done the same and has already thought about this issue. Right. Dig into it yourself and raise that issue. And boy, I can't tell you how valuable that's been to me a couple times when associates raise something that, I didn't get to that level of analysis in the case law, for example, right. And they raised an issue that's going to be valuable to the case and valuable to the client. Yeah, really good stuff. As you are looking to hire associates and going through that process, looking at resumes and cover letters, and then going through an interview process, and particularly maybe with those that are maybe have been out a couple of years or have had a little bit of experience and are looking maybe to make a move in a lateral type of scenario. What are some of the things, starting, I guess, with the resume cover letter? We talked about making sure they know where they're applying to and the city the office is in. What are some things that are important to you, that stand out to you, that you're really looking for in those initial screenings of resumes and cover letters? Yeah, we talked about some of them. For better or worse, class rank, certainly for the 2Ls and the 3Ls, class ranks an important consideration to some attorneys and some not so much. And so, certainly if you're on the good end of that, I certainly would encourage you to highlight that, because that's important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Other people, it's not as important to. But I think if you're not in the good half of that, I think you need to be able to acknowledge that and explain it to some degree, or acknowledge it and point to other strengths and why you'd be good for that particular position.
Right.
Certainly, I keep going back to the connections to that particular city or that particular firm or that particular practice area.
Right.
The more that you can individualize your desire to be at the place you're applying to, it is always better.
Yeah.
Most of us, in my position, looking for recruiting law clerks and recruiting new associates, want to hire somebody that is looking to be here for the long term.
Right.
We do not certainly at this firm look to churn work out of an associate and then let them loose. We hire associates to become shareholders, to become partners. Yeah. And we want somebody that is committed to growing with our firm and being in Fort Worth and with our firm for the long term. That's how, we have grown throughout the 43 years of this firm and how we want to continue to grow.
Yeah. As you move through the process and you start to interview somebody and are, trying to figure out if they're the right fit, if they are that long-term potential partner, what's maybe something in an interview setting that can set somebody up as a real viable candidate, as maybe a top contender for the position, or what's something that somebody can do that maybe starts to move them down the pack a little bit?
Well, we want engagement. We want them to we spend a lot of time up here together. Obviously, a lot of people say you spend more time with your work people than with your spouse and family. We want people that will fit in well here. We want people that are enjoyable to work with. We want to try to be enjoyable to work with, and we like our recruits to be the same. Engagement and a desire to please and to be here for the long term is really what we're going after, and that's a kind of a fuzzy generic answer without a lot of specifics. But I think the reason for that is that can take a lot of different forms. Sure, they don't have to talk like me and have the same interests as me. That'd be a boring place to work. But they being themselves. But I keep going back to just being interested in being here in particular, and being in Fort Worth in particular, and being here for the long term, and being part of the team is really what we're looking for. How
can you tell in an interview if someone is not that? What's a key indicator that maybe they aren't particularly interested in the long term, or in Fort Worth, or in oil and gas? What's a kind of key indicator that's not where they are, and you can see that in an interview?
Yeah, well, we've probably all been to dinner with people, with friends, or been in the situation ourselves where we don't want to be in a particular place, and it's quite evident to the person talking across the table that that they are trying to get through this as best they can, but they don't have a particular interest, excitement level, engagement level to be there, and a lot of times you can tell that from across the table. But I think you just need to be able to articulate why you're there, why this place, wherever you're applying, Austin, or a small firm in Austin or a big firm in Houston, why you think that is a good fit for you and a good fit for the firm. Yeah. Think about that critically before you walk in the door, right? And be able to answer those questions. Have an answer ready for why oil and gas, why Houston, why a big firm, why a small firm, why criminal law, and again, it's evident to a lot of interviewers, especially interviewers that have talked with a lot of law school students, when that's authentic and when it's forced. And so I think you just need to think critically about the reasons that you're there and why that law firm, why you would be excited to be at that law firm, and why they should be excited to have you join.
Yeah. It is amazing how, because sometimes and I asked it a couple different ways because I wanted you to explain it in a couple different ways, because it can be almost overlooked in some ways, I think, from candidates.
Sure.
That, of course they should know that I want to be there because I applied for the job and I'm sitting here in the interview. And it's funny how many times I've either after the fact or whatever talked to the interviewer or even the candidates and figured out that just never got communicated during the interview, how interested the person was, how much they wanted to be there. And it's almost sometimes from the candidate side just assumed, and it's not something that they thought that they needed to explain. And that is a mistake. And it oftentimes it is that they want to be there. They just didn't communicate it, and someone else did, and that person got the job. It's funny how that works, but it does.
And I get it, because I was there 20 years ago,
right.
And more than anything, I wanted a job. If I wouldn't have gotten this one, I would have wanted one in Dallas or in Austin. I mean, you need a job when you graduate law school. I get that.
Sure.
You don't always get to pick and choose. But there are no shortages of resumes coming into law firm recruiters, and I think the law firm recruiters are looking for people, again, will really be engaged and are not just looking for a paycheck every 2 weeks or every month, and that are looking to make a career, make a impact at that law firm.
I think that's absolutely right. Well, as we are running out of time here, I've got one more question to ask you about before we do our rapid fires here. So work-life balance is something we're always trying to figure out. It seems like both in the legal practice and legal community, but I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just here. But I think in a client service situation, in industry where a lot is demanded, it's even at a heightened it's a heightened scrutiny that we put on it to figure out what makes sense. How are you as a partner at Harris Finley Bogle and as a law firm looking at, especially with younger lawyers coming up in this era, how to kind of work through this work-life balance? And I hate to even call it that because it's almost lost its meaning in some ways. But how are you evaluating that and figuring out what makes sense for our lawyers in terms of what's appropriate in terms of expectations and commitment and all of that?
Sure. It is difficult because certainly at a law firm like ours, we do have some minimum hour requirements like most law firms do.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think schedule flexibility is one of the very underrated aspects of being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Certainly there are times when you have a deadline that day and need to be up at the office till that deadline gets satisfied, whether that's 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 11 o'clock. But a lot of other times you don't have those deadlines, and you have, if there's such a thing as a normal day.
Right.
And you could, and I think our law firm's very good at that. We've got people that get here at 6:30 in the morning, and their brain works best at 6:30 in the morning. They get started at 6:30 in the morning. Other people, their brain works best at 6 o'clock at night, and they work best then. I'm an early morning person. I like getting here early in the morning. I like getting the hardest thing out of the way early in the morning.
Yep.
And getting some work done. And some of that goes back to coaching a lot of sports teams and having practices at 5 o'clock. And I need to get out of the office at 4:15 in order to make practice at 5 o'clock.
Right.
But our law firm, and I think the legal profession generally allows for that sort of flexibility. It's not a store that has to be, you have to be at the cash register between 8:30 and 5 or anything like that.
Right.
You get the work done when you can, and as long as you are satisfying all your deadlines and satisfying your client requests, I don't think our law firm is too hung up on you being at your desk from 8:30 to 5:30 or anything like that. We're interested in you getting your work done whenever that may be and satisfying whatever the client needs are for that particular case or transaction.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Troy, I want to say thank you again for taking time to be with us today. I know it's you're busy and a lot going on, and so we really appreciate you spending this time with us. If you are ready, we've got a few last-minute rapid-fire questions to hit you with. So with that,
I'm ready.
All right, let's knock these out here. Name one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
Work ethic. Concern for their end work product and result. You'd be surprised how many just don't have a huge concern for the end result and work product. Not necessarily at our firm, but more generally speaking. And when you have a genuine concern for your work product and the result, that's noticed. That wasn't so rapid fire. I'll try to be quicker.
What habit has been key to your success?
Get done the hard thing, the thing that you aren't looking forward to first thing in the morning.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. That's a really good one. I like that. Favorite app or productivity tool?
I don't think these are too unique, but I love Transcript Pad on my iPad. I use my iPad a lot.
Yeah.
Transcript Pad on the iPad, Good Reader on the iPad. The website iPhoneJD.com. If people aren't familiar with that, that is a great source for getting all of your Apple legal questions answered.
Well, that is great. I don't think either of the ones that you just mentioned I've heard at least on the show thus far. So that's great. I'm glad you mentioned them. Good. And then lastly, and of course most important, favorite legal movie?
I think I'm going to have to go with A Few Good Men.
Good selection.
Yeah,
absolutely.
An oldie, but a goodie.
Well, we talked about this off air a little bit before we started here as we're doing these deep dives into legal movies here. And A Few Good Men was mentioned actually by our first guest as well on the show. And we are slated to record that one here in the next few days. So it will be coming soon. If you're listening right now, to those who like A Few Good Men and want to revisit that, it will be in the feed. And we have some current event stuff to update on that movie too, which is interesting. So
it's my cousin Vinny winning the survey so far.
It is, as you could imagine, and it was the first one out of the gate. But we are going to be going back also into some of the classics from the 50s and 60s as well, because there are some great legal movies, some of which I had not seen before kind of starting to research and for these shows. And so we're going to be maybe hopefully exposing people to some movies they need to check out as well. So, but A Few Good Men is obviously one that most have at this point seen and is a classic. So we will be doing that one soon.
Looking forward to that, Daniel. I'll tune in.
Well, Troy, thank you again for being with us. We are so grateful, and I think you just really were very kind and great in the things that you shared. So I know I learned a lot, and our audience, I'm sure, did as well. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Daniel. Have a good day.
All right, my thanks again to Troy Okruhlik for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing a couple of things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And also, if you could go into iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and rate and review the show. We haven't asked you to do that before, but that's something that we know can help others discover the show. And so if you would go in and do that, we would really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions or thoughts about the show, would you get in touch with me by email, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also want to let you know we do have another Movie Verdicts episode with Robert Callahan and myself. We are breaking down Marshall, the biopic of former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and that is coming later this week on Thursday. And so I hope you'll check that out. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, you should do that before you listen to the episode. So give you a little heads up on that. All right, thanks again to each and every one of you for listening to the Lone Star Lawyers. I'm Daniel here with Varsity Search, and we'll talk to you next time.